and we're going to make sure that it's available on our website to view in the next couple of days. Now, I've just got some housekeeping points. So please, can you remain muted for the session? If you have any questions, can you send them through the chat box? So hopefully you know how to use that chat box. You can send that through and we'll have a look at those questions and try to cover those at the end of the session. And hopefully we'll be done in the space of 60 minutes. You may want to also make sure that you use the view speaker button rather than the gallery mode, because that will just make the viewing experience a little bit better. Okay, well, to start with, what we're going to do is have a look at the wage subsidy, and we're going to break it down for everyone. In particular, we're going to have a look at the declaration that you'll be signing, and there's some key factors that we really want you to take away from this. And then we're going to have a look at the resurgence payment, which you may also be eligible for to apply for. So to help us, we've got Lisa, Catherine, and Darren. Perhaps you'd like to say a quick hello, just so
hello to all.
People know you're here.
Nice to see you all.
Hello.
That was Darren.
I'm Catherine.
Thanks, Catherine.
And hi, I'm Lisa.
Excellent. Okay. Right. So let's get underway. And what I'm going to do is actually bring up the declaration. I'm going to share my screen with you and bring up the declaration that you will be signing when you do your application. Now, I don't actually think that worked. It did work. Okay. Declaration's on there. Okay. Well, I cannot. I'm going to just try that again because for some reason I cannot access that. Let's try again. Share. I just love technology when it doesn't work for you. Okay, what I'll do is I will just bring that across to my other screen. And disconnect my AirPlay and then bring it up here. Okay, now it's on the screen. I will be able to share that. Share screen, declaration. Okay, now I can see it, which is very handy. Okay, so to start with, Lisa, there's some standard basic facts that all of our clients should be aware of. And when you look at the declaration here, you can see that obviously you need to be in business. So that's an easy one to be able to tick off. You can only claim for you and your staff, not staff who have been given notice of redundancy. And then the third point under that section 1, your business meets the revenue decline test. Lisa, can you take us through maybe some of the key points in that?
Sure can. So, in order for you to be eligible to apply, you need to meet this revenue decline test, which is set out in the declaration. So you need to show that your business will be or is being affected by the move to Alert Level 4. And you also have to have already had or predict to have a decline in revenue. So obviously we're only partway through this period at the moment. So you need to predict that for these next 2 weeks from the 17th of August 2017 right through and including the 30th of August 2021, sorry, that's 14-day period, you need to show that you're going to have a decline in revenue that's at least 40%, and then compare that to another 14-day period in the last 6 weeks. Or if your revenue isn't constant and it has seasonal fluctuations, then you can compare that same period, so the 17th of August 2021 to the 30th of August 2021, to the same period in either the 2019 or 2020 year. So that's the test, and since the last wage subsidy, the put out a bit more description around that seasonal testing to show that the period is the same period in 19 or 20. So that's the first part. When you're also making that calculation, you don't include any other subsidies that you've received in those periods. So if you're looking back, especially if it's seasonal, if you're looking back to 2020, you're not including any wage subsidies or any other subsidy payments that you've received in that period for the 2020 year. So just keep that in mind. So that's the first kind of test. It also applies to groups of companies. So where it slightly differs for groups of companies is where you might have companies that are essentially owned by the same shareholders. One may employ the staff and the other may generate the revenue. It would be the wage company which would apply for the subsidy, but the revenue test is kind of looked at as the group. So you need to apply one or both of these tests to the companies depending on which one suits, and look at it and see if it's eligible based on that 40% decrease in revenue.
So one of the important things, Lisa, here is about having evidence, isn't it? You need evidence to support the application, and you need
that's right,
to demonstrate that.
Yep. So the type of evidence that's required and is really important is that the decline has happened due. You need to be able to show or have evidence on file that the decline in revenue is as a result of the move to Alert Level 4, so that the decline is COVID related rather than anything else. So you might have documentation of meetings that you've had or of other reasons showing that it's COVID related. It might be that you've had to close your doors completely, in which case your evidence might be really easy to gather, but not so easy if you have managed to stay open online, or that you can partially go back because you've got partial essential services. So it's just pulling together a picture of why your revenue's decreased and the periods that you're looking at. So what periods you are comparing to, whether it's another period in the last 6 weeks, or whether it's seasonal and you're comparing to a period in 19 or 2020. So it's just having enough documentation on file that if it's requested, it's all there ready to go.
So I guess for some of our clients who are maybe have a cash business, or they're purely on sales, they could compare the amount of money that's coming into their bank account over that 14-day period. Obviously, they won't be able to do this until that 14-day period is up, ending 30th of August, from the 17th to the 30th, and compare it with a similar 2-week period, sometime in the previous 6 weeks. So that would be one way to do it. Or if you're you're charging for your time, you may want to use the invoice basis as your method for comparing how much have you invoiced over that 2-week time period versus what you normally would. Some traps for our clients to be aware of is that it doesn't mean that you can just post date your invoices to after that 14-day period, because that wouldn't be ethical, wouldn't it? Would it? If you were able to work during that two-week period, you wouldn't want to just push out all the invoices to the day after that 14-day period. There's another interesting point, actually, and I'll just highlight it for you here. There's mitigating the impact. Maybe Darren, if you want to make a comment on this paragraph, because that's an interesting one.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Yeah, it is an interesting paragraph, and it was in the original wage subsidy declaration in the first round that we went through. And as it mentions there, before making this declaration, it states that you must have taken active steps to mitigate the impact of the move to level 4 on your business, and gives some examples of what that may include: engaging with your bank, drawing on your cash reserves as appropriate, and making an insurance claim. And you might remember after the first round of subsidy, there was quite a bit of commentary in the public space about what that actually meant. Did it mean that if a business or company had cash reserves, that it must use that before it applies for the wage subsidy? If it was able to borrow from the bank, should it do that before it could claim for the wage subsidy? So the wording there doesn't actually say that a business must use its cash reserves. It just mentions that it must take steps to mitigate the effect of the alert level 4. And interestingly, one of the articles that appeared on Stuff News from Robin Walker, who's a tax partner at Deloitte's, made this comment, which sort of, I think, made some sense. She said that while there's an expectation that businesses look to their own available resources in order to pay staff when faced with an uncertain period of lockdown, it may also be reasonable to not use all cash reserves to pay staff when there are other expenses to be paid, and using those reserves may otherwise negatively impact on the ongoing viability of the business. And she also mentioned too that the Auditor General, when he reviewed the wage subsidy scheme in the first round, identified that this paragraph is not really clearly defined as to what it means or what its intent is. So it's still a bit of an unknown, and you know, there may be further commentary and opinion about as to what that means. But I think just note that it is part of the declaration. It is part of the criteria that you are able to demonstrate that you did take steps to mitigate the impact on your business. It doesn't necessarily say that you must use your cash reserves first, but it does say that you do need to protect your business, take some steps to at least protect it and keep it in good stead during this time.
I actually had the opportunity to interview the Minister of Small Business at the time, Stuart Nash, regarding the declaration last year that everyone signed. And he too couldn't actually explain what they meant by when they talked about active steps to mitigate the impact. There was an expectation from the government that most people last year, when lockdown happened, would most employers, especially SMEs, would take the subsidy and make sure they kept their staff going, and that's what they were happy with. If everyone did that, then there wasn't a problem. So yeah, that's an interesting one. I'm not sure how to interpret that either. So thanks for that, Darren. Do you think we've covered most of the points there, Lisa, on that first point?
Yeah, I think so. One of the other parts in terms of the evidence, just to clarify, and this kind of goes back to making sure we invoice our time if we need to, and not deferring income, I suppose, into another period, is that when you want to compare using the seasonality type approach, you need to also have evidence of why you would fall into that seasonal approach. So you can't pick and choose if you don't have seasonal income that fluctuates. You can't just look at this 14-day period, compare it to 19 and 20 if that gives you a better result. They're going to want to make sure that you only use that where you have that seasonal income fluctuation.
Excellent, thank you for that. Okay, so the second point is your obligations to use the subsidy to retain and pay named employees. Catherine, can you just help us with some of the key points under this heading? It's quite different to what happened last round a year and a bit ago.
Yeah, so in granting the application and receiving the subsidy, it doesn't override your existing obligations under the employment law. You can't make changes to any employment agreement, including rates of pay, hours of work, and leave entitlements, without the written agreement of the relevant employee.
That's a key point, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Yeah,
after the last lockdown, a lot of employers would say to the employees, look, we know that you can't work, you're at home, you're stuck for 4 weeks, 5 weeks, whatever it was, and therefore we want to pay you 80% because that's what we were obligated to do, pay you 80% of your wages, and there's not much you can do about it. However, after that, a whole lot of employment lawyers in general, they stepped in and said, well, wait a minute, you've actually got a contract with your staff that you are going to pay them. You can't expect them to take their leave under this lockdown. So that's why it's really important that if you go down that line of changing what your staff are expecting based on what they're contracted to do, that you do make sure that you have a written agreement and it's been discussed with your employees.
Yeah, so one of those points is that you are not to compel or require any of your employees to use any of their annual leave entitlements. if you receive the subsidy for those employees.
There's in employment law, there's a term, what's fair and reasonable. So you need to make sure that you do what's fair and reasonable with your employees. And if there's ever an issue in the future, employment law says, well, what did this employer do? And they often compare what you've done with what a fair and reasonable employer has done. Now, at the moment, I'm not sure if you're in the same boat as what we are, but it's very difficult to find staff. There's a real shortage of staff. So whatever you decide to do, you want to make sure that you keep your staff, you communicate with your staff, you treat them as well as you can. However, there's always going to be situations where you don't have the money to be able to support your staff by paying them their full wages. Make sure that if that's the situation for you, you communicate with your staff and let them know, look, we're really not in a position to pay you your full wages, particularly if the lockdown, we know that it's going until at least Friday night here. That's 8 working days that you have to pay your staff. If you financially can't afford to pay them the 100%, then make sure you discuss it with them. And if you do make that change to the 80%, that you've got a written agreement. Any other points in that section?
So it is important that you retain those employees that you have applied for the subsidy for the period of that subsidy.
Yes.
And also repaying any amount of the subsidy that is not required for these purposes, and that can't be used to support any other staff.
So that's an interesting point, isn't it? And it also makes a comment regarding sole traders. Darren, maybe you want to make a remark, some comments on that.
Yeah, so this is another new paragraph from what we're used to. We might have heard the stories of sort of people delivering newspapers and the like on $20 a week getting $350 wage subsidy. So there's now quite a paragraph in here under where that you've highlighted there that if you're a sole trader or self-employed person, then the weekly amount that you pay yourself is what's defined as being the ordinary wage or salary. And so if you receive more than what you would normally pay yourself as a self-employed person or in a partnership, then this is now saying that if you get more subsidy than you actually earn or draw down, and then there is a requirement there to pay it back. So it seems to be clearly indicating now that if the wage subsidy you get as a sole trader in a partnership or in your business is more than you are making or earning, then there is a clear requirement that excess be paid back to them. However, we're talking only 2 weeks at this point, which would be fairly minimal, but it does stop people who are maybe making a loss from claiming the subsidy for themselves, or people who are earning a very low amount of income below that wage subsidy level.
Very good. Thank you for that. Okay, so you happy with the comments? Anything else in point number 2, Catherine? I think we've covered that. Okay, brilliant. So 3 to 5, look at the agreement your agreement to share the information that you're providing to various government and other agencies, in particular relating to the applications and the potential review or audit in the future. And now we'll just go on to point number 6, which is discussing your application with your named employees and gaining their consent. Now, this is also a very important point, Lisa. Do you want to run through some of these key points?
Yeah, sure. So as part of your application, as part of your declaration, you need to have discussed that you are going to, or that you discuss with your employees, and they need to consent to giving the information as part of your application. So you need to ensure that you've discussed it with the employees that are named in your application. You need to ensure that you have informed them of the outcome, so whether it is approved or denied, and as part of that, what the conditions are, so that, for example, some of the points that Catherine spoke about before, the amount that you're going to pay them, that they can't be retrenched over that period, all of those things need to be communicated to the employee. You also need to have consent from them in writing if practicable. So we would recommend that you have consent via email or some other written form, that they agree to you providing their information to the Ministry of Social Development, that they consent to any additional information. So as part of the application, if the MSD come back and ask for additional information, that they also consent to that being provided, and that you also need to tell the MSD if their employment ceases for any particular reason, if the employee decides to resign, etc. That information needs to be provided and they consent to that.
So if any of our clients want to send this information to their employees to agree to, obviously this isn't worded very well. So what Work and Income have done, and I'll just show you now where to find the privacy information to give to your employees. So here it is here under the Work and Income website, and I'll just go down here. I hope everyone can see that, and I'll just undo that one. So you can go to the section if you have people working for you. So you click on that, and then you scroll down, and it has the application there where you'd put your employees and yourselves as shareholder employees, employment types, etc. And there's this privacy information for employees. Now, if you click on that, this is an awesome document that you can send through to your employees and say, here is the privacy information. Do you agree to all of these terms and conditions? So all of the information that we saw in that declaration is in this document. You can email it to your staff, you can text it to your staff, and then if you need to get confirmation that they're happy with that. If it's a text, there's nothing wrong with just taking a screenshot to say, yes, I agree with that, or yes, I agree with that privacy information, or an email, which you can more easily save. But a lot of our clients, they just text their staff and communicate via text or WhatsApp or whatever the case may be. So nothing wrong with sending it through, but just record the evidence that your employees have agreed to this. And that's quite important, isn't it, Lisa?
Yeah, that's right. And also just remembering that if you're a sole trader or self-employed, that you're basically, by signing the declaration, agreeing to this in relation to your own information.
Very good. Okay, so that's point number 6. 7 through to 9 relate to the Privacy Act, that employees have the right to request information that's been held regarding them, and that information also is on that other form that I shared with you. And then 10 and 11, so notify changes in eligibility. Catherine, this is quite an important point.
Yes, so if anything does change from your application, within 5 working days, you do need to notify Ministry of Social Development and include any named employees if they end their relationship with you. It may be that you are then not eligible for the subsidy, so you will be required to repay that subsidy that you've received.
So at the moment, your application can be based on the fact that it looks like your income is going to decline. So you can make an application based on the fact that we're in lockdown. However, once you get to the end of that 2-week period, if you do not meet the criteria, then obviously you need to repay the subsidy. And it's very important, the legal terms in there regarding that, and making sure you don't provide false or misleading information, etc. Okay, paragraphs 12 through to 17. Basically, you can get into trouble if you provided false or misleading information. You've got authority to make the declaration, etc. The one issue that I have with this document is point 15. The ministry may amend this declaration. You acknowledge the Ministry of Social Development may amend this declaration at any time and at its discretion. I'm not sure why that's there, because you've signed this declaration. Surely if they make any changes, it's not going to apply to the declaration you made. And we noticed that last year for those who did applications before the 26th of March, Darren, I think it was, there was a different set of or different declaration to after the 27th. So when our clients asked us questions regarding what they could do or couldn't do, we had to refer to what declaration did they sign. So I'm not sure why that's there. If anyone knows, let us know. That'd be great. Okay, now it's time to look at the resurgence support payment. And just remember, if you've got any questions, you can send them through to that using that chat feature. And here is the under IRD's website, eligibility for the resurgence support payment. Darren.
Yes.
Help us out.
The resurgence support payment, or it's better known as the RSP. It's a lot easier to say. So this is slightly different to the wage subsidy, but in a lot of respects the same, but it does have a different purpose. As you can see there, that its purpose is to support viable and ongoing businesses when the alert level goes up to level 2 or higher and causes a reduction in revenue. So the government chooses as to when this is activated, and it does, for this time, is activated tomorrow because it covers the period of 7 days. It looks at a 7-day period, and so tomorrow being the 7-day from when the alert level increased. It's available nationally, even though an alert level may only affect part of the country. So we can go back to level 3, level 2, or even level 1, but if another part of the country is still subject to an alert level change, then it's still available to everyone in the country as long as they meet the criteria. So as I mentioned, our applications are open 8 o'clock tomorrow, and they stay open until 1 month after all of New Zealand returns back to alert level 1. Now the government may invoke, due to different alert level changes, in that they may reactivate this at different times, and so you can reapply each time it's activated. So the eligibility criteria for this, it's similar, but in some respects different to the wage subsidy. Firstly, you'll note there it looks at a 30% drop in revenue and over a 7-day period. So it's a bit easier than the wage subsidy, which was a 40% over 14-day. But it is common, and it is due to the increased alert level. So again, as Lisa talked about, it does have to have that link that your income reduction is due to the increased alert level because of COVID. So you look at a 7-day test period for determining your revenue, and that can be any 7 days within the alert period time. And then you compare it to, it refers to a typical 7-day period in the 6 weeks prior to the increased alert date. So that's 6 weeks prior to the 17th of August. You look at a typical 7-day revenue period for that. Again, these people who are in seasonal businesses, it uses the term highly seasonal businesses. They can compare to a similar point in the seasonal cycle in the year prior. So it's not necessarily the exact calendar equivalent, but it does mention a similar point in the seasonal cycle. So that's a wee bit of a difference to the wage subsidy one. And then again, with a commonly owned group. So if you have a group of businesses or companies which are owned by the same group of people, doesn't necessarily mean that they have the exact same percentage of shareholding, but if the same people own the same group of companies, then this test must be applied at the group level. You've got to look at the revenue of the group and determine whether it meets that 30% threshold or not. You don't look at the individual businesses on their own.
And that's interesting, because you might have a business which can continue to trade because it's online, or the workers are working from home, and it might be doing very well. In fact, it might be doing better than what it would in the past. But if just because you've got another business which isn't doing so well, you need to make sure that you combine all that information together. And so we can assist with that. If you need help doing the calculation, then please contact us. We're certainly not expecting you to do it all on your own. Make sure that you use us if you need assistance.
Yeah, and a couple of other differences to the wage subsidy too on this one. A business must have been in business for at least 6 months, so not immediate startups. It mentions that the business must be considered viable and ongoing. So there's almost like a going concern test in there. So the business must be able to look like it can continue. Passive income like interest, dividends, residential and commercial rent, they're excluded from this. They're not included in the revenue calculation. So if you have a commercial building and you give a rent holiday for a bit, then that doesn't come into this criteria. Businesses must be physically present in New Zealand, applicants older than 18 years of age, and you must have a New Zealand business number too, which is different to the wage subsidy as well. And so you can receive this this payment while receiving other COVID-19 support payments. So it's in addition to the wage subsidy. You can get the wage subsidy and you can get this if you qualify as well. And if you satisfy the wage subsidy criteria, then there may be a good chance you will also satisfy this one, but you will have to run through the eligibility criteria there as well.
The payment amount is quite interesting, isn't it? Especially when it comes to part-time employees. Maybe you can run through the examples that they use here and how they calculate what is a full-time employee.
Yeah, so the maximum that can be got, as I mentioned here, is 21,500, and the minimum there for a sole trader, single person, is $1,900. So that's kind of the range that we're talking about here. How that's calculated, it uses a lesser of calculation. So there's two parts to the calculation, and you've got to calculate them both, and then unfortunately you take the lower figure. So the first part of the calculation is you start off with $1,500, sort of like how you start Monopoly. You get a baseline, and then you add $400 for every full-time equivalent employee that you person that's in your business. So up to a maximum of 50. So that works out, if you work that out, 50 employees times 400 plus your 1,500, that's where your maximum of 21,500 comes from. If you have part-time employees, then as it mentions there, they're considered to be 0.6 full-time equivalents. So in an example that they give, if you have 4 part-time employees, multiply that by 0.6, and that gives you 2.4. You then always round up. So it's not like going to the supermarket or the Swedish rounding, but you always round up. So 2.4 becomes 3 full-time equivalents. And so you would put that into your calculation, 3 times the 400 for those part-time employees. The second part of the calculation looks at what your actual revenue decline is. So if you, for example, if your revenue declined by $1,000 for the week for those 7 days, you multiply that by 4. And then you look at the lesser of as to which figure is the lesser, either the 1,500 plus the full-time earner calculation, or 4 times your actual revenue decline. So if the full-time earner calculation gave you, say, $10,500 and your revenue decline was 1,000, multiply that by 4, that gives you $4,000. If that was your situation, then the amount you would get in this would be the lesser of, which is the $4,000.
And there's an online calculator, isn't there, to assist?
Yeah, there's a link, yes, so that you can go through. It works you through the eligibility as well. When you do make application, because it's they need those figures to be able to calculate what you're entitled to, just be prepared that you will have to enter in your actual revenue decline figures so that they can work that in there for you as well.
And that's very generous. The whole part-time employee being 0.6 and then multiplying that and then rounding up, that's quite generous of the government, don't you think?
It's one thing that we've got,
So yeah, if you've got a few part-timers and you can round up, it's great. Anything else you want to cover on that under the resurgence support payment?
I think a couple of things is the fact that it actually quite sort of clearly spells out how the income is to be calculated. So that it does mention that if you're in a cash type retail sort of basis where you get daily takings, so your revenue is based on that. But if you're in a business that you are invoicing clients, maybe not till the end of the month or something like that, then it is based on the actual activities in that 7-day period that you've undertaken. So you may not have actually invoiced or got any money, but you're actually valuing in dollar terms the service that you've provided or the product that you've supplied even though you may not have been paid for it or actually billed anyone for it. And so, yeah, it's set a lot is set out much more clearly than what the wage subsidy one is how to calculate the income. The other point too is that the resurgence support payment can be used for covering business expenses such as wages and fixed costs is what it can be used for. And it's an inland revenue run scheme, so you don't apply through the Ministry of Social Welfare, you apply through the IRD to the MyIR.
Yeah. And so you can find the link on the IRD website. If you go to the COVID19.govt.nz website, on this page, you will have the details for both. So there is the COVID-19 wage subsidy scheme. Find out if you're eligible. That takes you through to the WINS website. And then the resurgence support payment, when you click on that link, that takes you through to IRD. So hopefully that covers the most of the information on there and the two different types of support that you can get. Now we'll just run through some of these questions that have been asked already through the chat box. So thank you for your messages that have come through. The first one, can you take the profit you make in a year and divide it by 52? Who would like to answer that one?
Is that, are they referring, if they're referring to the wage subsidy, then, oh, well, actually they might be referring, if they're dividing it by 52, they might be referring to the RSP payment, because that's only for 7 days, isn't it?
Mm.
So if it's for the wage subsidy, then no, you need to look at the period specifically between the 17th of August and the 30th of August inclusive at the moment, and compare that to the relevant period. So it can't be done on an average for the wage subsidy.
Mm.
And the same answer, I think, for the resurgence payment, it is based on the revenue lost in that 7-day period. And you're comparing it to a period 6 weeks earlier. So you're actually looking at a week compared to some other week within 6 weeks earlier. So it's within the same financial year. So you're actually making a comparison of that actual week.
Yeah, that's really good. We got this question a lot last year. How do you work out casual hours? And we actually had to assist a few of our clients with regards to what would they normally be required to work. And so if you used the last 52 weeks, that often wouldn't give you a good picture of what they were expected to work. So we had one case where we looked at the last, was it 6 months, Rebecca? Rebecca's just off screen. Was it the last 6 months or the last 3 months of what they were working when we worked out casual hours and an average of the hours? Do you remember? I'll put you on the spot.
Sorry, what was the question?
Working out casual hours,
Yeah.
how many weeks did we go back to work out what was the average hours to work out whether or not they were part-time or full-time? Do you remember what we did for that one particular client?
Can't remember.
We
but
definitely didn't use the
very-
52
It
weeks.
was very seasonal, and we felt that it was fair and reasonable to use their previous 3 months, I think, which was in the employees.
Right. So hopefully, I'm not sure if you all heard that, but we basically worked out what happened in the last 3 months, and was there an expectation that if COVID didn't hit, that they would be working over the period of lockdown? And we worked out that if that was the case, work out the average of the hours that they've worked for the previous 3 months, if there was an expectation that they would still be working over that period. Does that hopefully answer that? No one's going yes.
I think so somewhere I have seen that they do mention in working it out that you look back over 52 weeks. But yeah, these times, if someone started within the 52 weeks, you just go back to when they start, obviously. But yeah, for some cases, that gives a clearly unrealistic answer.
Yes. Yep. Very good. I'm actually going to see if I can add the attachment. Oh, help. What we might do is we'll make sure that a copy of the Privacy information PDF is available on our website. It will probably won't be this evening, but it will be from tomorrow. And also we'll get a copy of this, the recording of this also on our website. But you can find it under the application page on WINS, that PDF. Okay, so more questions that we've got here. Because the last few weeks, our casual employee has been working a lot. But before that, not much. Well, once again, I think that if you've had a month of a casual employee working and there was an expectation that they would be working also in the next couple of weeks, I think that you've got a pretty good argument to say that you could base it on how many hours that they were working and the expectation, once again, of what they would be working.
And that might come down to that gathering the evidence point where there may be some communication between yourself and the casual employee in relation to what was expected before COVID hit, which would draw down that evidence that's required.
Yes.
And then you'd be paying them on that same basis.
Yes, you'd be paying them on that same basis. Yes, correct. Okay, very good. So another comment here. Our staff are all at home and can't work during level 4. We can't afford to pay them any more than the wage subsidy. Does the 80% only apply to those working from home? Well, that's an interesting point because the terms say that you need to pay your employees at least 80% of their normal wage. So if the subsidy is less than that, you are topping that up. Everyone agrees with that? Yeah. So you can't just pay them the subsidy if the subsidy doesn't come up to 80% of their wage. So you obviously you need to still discuss it with your staff. You need to make sure that they sign an agreement that they're happy to get the 80% rather than their 100% that they would normally get. And Rebecca's got a comment on that.
The other option is maybe if there's absolutely no money to pay anything more, that you part of the variation to the contract was to reduce their hours.
Right,
as well.
Right. So did you guys hear that? That you could actually, if you were desperate, you could actually come to an agreement and change the employment agreement to say, look, we don't have the ability to pay you even the 80%. Dogs barking, awesome. But you'd have to change that employment agreement, and you'd actually have to get the employee to sign that they agree with that. Another question, RSP, would that be appropriate for a company when you're an essential service so you can officially operate, but your main or only employee can't due to child's commitments? So I imagine that if that was the situation, you would be eligible for the RSP, but you should also be eligible for the wage subsidy if you've got that decline of 40%.
Yeah, or 30% under RSP. So the first hurdle is your income needs to decline. So that's what it hinges on. Is my income declined by that percentage, and then is it because of COVID?
Another comment, must be accommodation. We've had some cancellations, but these are cancelled out of the dates of the COVID outbreak. Can we still claim? Well, I imagine that you would have a lot of people that haven't been able to, or that have cancelled their bookings inside also the lockdown period. I don't think that you'd be able to claim the wage subsidies if you do actually have people staying in your accommodation at the moment. It needs to be that time period from the 17th through to the 30th for the wage subsidy.
Yeah, and I think, again, this would come down to that evidence point where the decline in revenue is subject to level 4 lockdown. So if the decline occurred due to bookings that were cancelled prior to COVID and they weren't in relation to this level 4 alert, then they would not be included as part of the revenue decrease.
And just on the resurgence payment one, even though it's looking at a week's worth of income, the active period of it doesn't stop until the country basically goes back to alert level 1. So it's a very long, this will probably be a much longer period. So you can pick 7 days within that time. So it may well be that the resurgence payment you may qualify for that if it's further on down the track.
Very good. Another question, a casual worker helping out this week only, last week no work. Do I apply and pay 1 week back. Well, that's an interesting point. Maybe we can have a chat to you directly and try and work out what to do on that one. Casual workers are more difficult. What's fair and reasonable? Was there an expectation that they would be working this week? We can have a talk to you directly about that. And another comment, wage subsidy, written agreement from all staff members is a requirement, ? Yes. So you do need something, well, it's written if practical, I think it says, doesn't it, on the under the wage subsidy? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so if it's practical to get something written, then great. But text messages or emails, or even if you're calling them on the phone and they say yes, you can record that. If it wasn't practical because they can't text, I don't know how many people would you'd get. I think you'd want evidence, and I think have even just a screenshot, like I mentioned, about a text message saying yes, I agree with all of that, I think is the best course of action.
Yeah, because you definitely need that. You need that consent from them. So you need to have discussed it with them and have consent that that they're going to be as part of this application. So you need proof of that, I suppose.
Yes. Another couple of questions. Home-based business, have money in the business bank account for support due to not taking drawings for a while. Am I not eligible for a subsidy? That's an interesting question. That comes back to the mitigating factors, and have you actually tried to mitigate the whole impact of COVID? Now, if you haven't taken much in the way of drawings, and if lockdown is only going to be 2 to 4 weeks under level 4, do you need to apply for the wage subsidy? It's an interesting one, isn't it? So there's that question as well. I mean, there were quite a few businesses last year that were eligible to claim the wage subsidy, but after a bit of time, they realized that actually the year was going okay. They had cash reserves, and a lot of big businesses actually paid back the wage subsidy. And there was a lot of talk in the media regarding that. So I guess that's a question you have to ask yourself. Do I actually need the money? Do I need to apply for the wage subsidy, or am I going to be okay by living on my reserves? Any other comments about that from Darren, Catherine, or Lisa?
I think it's about as good as it gets, because there is no certain answer to that. But yeah, like you said, there was a lot of commentary on it in the previous round with no real answer.
Yeah. Okay. So back to the other question about says your best effort to pay 80%, but is not mandatory. So let's go back to that declaration and look at that term again. I'll just bring that up here. So it does say, for the period you receive the subsidy, you will use your best endeavors to pay at least 80% of each named employee's ordinary wages. Yep. So you are correct. You do have to use your best endeavors to pay 80%. If you can't and you want to only pay them the subsidy, then you may be able to pay them just the subsidy, but you would have to get a written agreement from them that that was going to be the case. I think that one of the concerns with not paying them at least 80% is, just imagine your employees and what they're going to do when they talk to other employees in 3 or 4 weeks' time, when they're at the pub or when they're out forward driving. You've got to do your best to keep your staff. And yes, I understand that, financially things might be tough, but if we're going to be in lockdown for another couple of weeks, you can imagine that there would be an extension on this wage subsidy, that it's not just going to be for the 2 weeks, that they would extend it for a little bit longer.
Yeah, I think that is right. They have said that they would look at it again if the lockdown is extended.
So if you are in the position where you can't even pay them the 80%, I think that you just have to be careful, that because your staff will be talking to other friends, relatives, and when they find out that, oh no, they're only getting 50% or they're only getting the subsidy, then it doesn't put you in very good light, even though it might be tough for you. And maybe if you apply also for that resurgence payment, then that can help offset some of the cost of the wages, because you can use the money for that resurgence payment for anything. Hey, Darren, including capital payments. So if you want to use that to support your staff, then that's not a bad idea. Yeah. So just remember that you need to legally, you need to make sure that everyone agrees. Okay, so hopefully that's covered all the messages that have come in. Hopefully everyone's happy with the information that we've gone through. If you do have any other questions, please make contact with us. Give us a call, send us an email. We can assist you with any questions that you might have.
One other thing, Richard, we were just going to cover very quickly off was the tax treatment of the two subsidies.
Excellent. Yep, do it.
So the wage subsidy and the resurgence, one, think of it as being taxable income. It's said to be exempt or excluded income, but in all intents and purposes, think of it as taxable. If you're GST registered, the wage subsidy is not subject to GST, so no GST to pay on that, but the resurgence payment is subject to GST if you're GST registered. And the rationale behind that is that if you're GST registered, then the costs you use it for in paying business expenses, you'll be able to claim back the GST on that as well. So yeah, so it's both a taxable income, wage subsidy, not GSTable, resurgence payment is GST, subject to GST if you're registered.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Any closing remarks from Lisa or Catherine?
Just one final point on the time you have to apply for the wage subsidy, which I don't think we spoke about. So currently the wage subsidy is open for 2 weeks, and I think it opened on the 20th of August. So you've got that initial 2-week period that you can make an application. And remembering it's a 2-week test, so you may want to wait till it's a little bit closer to the end of that 2-week period so that you know that you might meet those decline in revenue. But again, like Richard said, if lockdown is extended, then they'll likely extend the period or make another new wage subsidy kind of period in the near future. So that's just remembering that this subsidy has got a 2-week period starting on the 20th of August.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for all zooming in. And like I say, if you have any questions, then please contact us. Hopefully we will talk to you again soon. Thank you very much.